There are nights in boxing that transcend the sport itself. Nights where the brutality and beauty of the sweet science collide in a manner so raw, so unapologetically violent, that the memory of it lingers for decades in the minds of those fortunate enough to witness it. The fight between Thomas the Hitman Hearns and Juan Domingo Roldan was precisely one of those nights, a collision of two warriors with nothing to offer each other but destruction, fought at a pace that made the crowd hold their breath from the opening bell to the final, thunderous conclusion. Mills Lane, the legendary referee from Reno, Nevada, stepped into the ring that evening with his trademark command, delivering the instructions with that unmistakable authority only he possessed. "Let's get it on," he declared, and those four words carried the weight of prophecy. The judges were assembled from across the globe: Rolando Verovio from Italy, Marty from Switzerland, Larry Nanday from the Philippines, all bearing witness to what would become one of the most ferocious middleweight battles ever recorded. The fight was scheduled for 12 rounds, but anyone watching from ringside could sense in their gut that this thing was not going the distance. The energy in the arena was electric, tightly coiled, like the moment before lightning strikes. Thomas Hearns entered the ring as a man transformed. The Detroit-born fighter, already a legend in the welterweight and light middleweight divisions, had made his way to middleweight, carrying with him both the scars of his legendary war with Sugar Ray Leonard and the hard-won wisdom of a man who had been broken down and rebuilt. He was leaner now, longer, and somehow even more dangerous. The reach, the speed, the right hand that had been putting men to sleep since the late 1970s, all of it remained, sharpened by experience into something approaching perfection. Hearns was not just a puncher, he was a tactician with a sledgehammer. Juan Domingo Roldan, the Argentine brawler, was no sacrificial lamb. The man had a reputation built on ruggedness and forward pressure. He was awkward, hard to time, and possessed the kind of chin and heart that made him dangerous to anyone who underestimated him. His style was unconventional and disruptive, the kind that could throw off a technically superior boxer if that boxer allowed himself to be pulled into a firefight. Roldan threw from unusual angles, dropped his left hand at irregular moments, and had a habit of launching that overhand right from positions that seemed physically improbable. He came to fight, came to impose himself, and from the opening seconds of round one, he did exactly that. But Hearns was faster. From the very first exchange, it was clear that Roldan's forward aggression was going to run headlong into a buzzsaw. Tommy Hearns began swinging early, combinations landing with that distinctive crack that seemed to echo through the arena. The crowd could see it, the difference in hand speed, the difference in timing, and yet Roldan kept pressing, kept throwing, kept making it difficult for Hearns to settle into any kind of rhythm. Tommy lifted his hands in moments of showmanship, the kind of gesture that delighted the crowd, but drew criticism from ringside observers who understood how quickly the dynamic of a fight can shift. This was not the moment for bravado. Roldan was dangerous, and the fight proved it almost immediately. Then came the shot. A right hand from Hearns, clean and devastating, landed directly over the top of Roldan's guard and sent the Argentine down to the canvas for the first time. It was the first truly clean shot of the fight, and it carried with it all the weight of the Hitman's legendary power. The referee began the count, but Roldan rose, shook it off, and came forward again with the aggression of a man who had not yet received the message that he was in serious trouble. This is what made him compelling, not just his toughness, but his refusal to acknowledge danger even when it was staring him directly in the face. What followed in those first two rounds was extraordinary in its brutality. Hearns, rather than moving to the outside and picking Roldan apart from range, which his physical attributes made entirely possible, instead stood his ground and engaged, trading at close quarters in a manner that thrilled the crowd but gave his corner legitimate cause for concern. Tommy's head stayed high at moments when discipline demanded it stay low. He was getting nailed. Roldan found the range with that sneaky right hand and those looping punches that the broadcast team had warned about before the fight even began. and there were moments where Hearns genuinely appeared hurt, his legs unstable beneath him, his retreat towards the ropes suggesting that the Argentine had found something inside him that the Hitman preferred to keep hidden. Roldan went down again before the end of round 2, that second knockdown coming from another thunderous right hand by Hearns, although the broadcaster was quick to note that it wasn't a single defining blow, but rather the cumulative punishment that sent him to the canvas. By the time the bell rang to end round 2, 3 knockdowns had already been scored by Hearns. 3 times in the space of less than 10 minutes of boxing, the Argentine had been put on the floor, and yet each time Roldan stood up. Each time he came forward. The sheer stubbornness of the man was something bordering on supernatural. Round 3 brought a change in complexion. Hearns, perhaps overconfident, perhaps feeling the pace of the early rounds, began to slow. His jab, which had barely been used, a fact that drew pointed criticism from the broadcast commentary, was finally deployed with more regularity, and it helped establish the distance he needed. But Roldan was not passive. He was bleeding from the nose now, a thin trickle that had begun somewhere in the chaos of the second round, and yet he kept advancing, kept throwing that right hand, kept making Hearns uncomfortable. The Argentine had clearly decided that if he was going to lose this fight, he was going to make Hearns earn every moment of it. Both corners were animated between rounds. Hearns' corner implored him to pace himself. The early pace was punishing, and Tommy was breathing heavily coming back to the stool. He was told to box, to use movement, to go side to side, rather than standing in front of a man who, whatever his limitations, was clearly capable of hurting him. Roldan's corner was equally engaged, urging him to stay busy, to go to the body, to not let Hearns dictate the terms of engagement. The fight had settled into something raw and personal, the technical dimensions of boxing falling away to reveal something more primal underneath. By 4th round, the damage on both men was visible. Roldan dropped his left hand repeatedly, a habit that Hearns' team had studied in preparation and that Hearns himself was beginning to exploit with increasing precision. The right hand that had always been Hearns' signature weapon was finding the target with alarming regularity, and yet Roldan refused to go down again. He was weaving, he was bending at the waist, he was doing everything in his considerable repertoire to survive the onslaught, and for stretches of the round he succeeded, making Hearns miss and landing his own rough, clubbing shots in return. There was a moment in those middle rounds, a stretch where Roldan managed to get Hearns against the ropes and land several right hands in sequence, where it appeared, briefly and startlingly, that the narrative of the fight might shift entirely. Hearns' legs went underneath him, his eyes lost their sharpness. The crowd sensed it, that electric, collective intake of breath that fills an arena when a great fighter is suddenly in genuine danger. In that moment, Juan Domingo Roldan could have been anyone. He could have been Sugar Ray Leonard in that legendary 4th round when he had the Hitman hurt and failed to follow through decisively. History repeats itself in boxing, or at least it threatens to, until someone prevents it. But Hearns was wiser now. Where the young Thomas Hearns would have tried to punch his way out of trouble, the veteran grabbed, clutched, and survived. He used the clinch as a tool, something he famously failed to do in his loss to Leonard, where the lack of experience with adversity had cost him dearly. He held